Hello, mic check.
Ooh, how's it going, everyone?
Hey, well, thank you all for coming here. I think there's some representation of people who care about education in the room. As you can see, most of y'all should have a piece of paper or a pen. The main purpose for that is so that you have something other than your phone to play with. And we're going to cover a wide span of topics, and it's easier to remember things if you jot them down. Now, if you don't want to pay attention, that's completely cool too. Try to doodle, try to draw. It feels really good as well. And so, with that, I think we want to start this with I'll pass it your way, Norm.
Oh,
Okay, I got it.
now we're ready. Class is in session.
Class is in session, but I think the stream for some reason is on my phone. All right. So, I'm Yatú,
And I'm Norm.
and we're both artist founders, which means we create organizations as a form of art. And what we are often known as is being founders of USB Club, which is a social network built on USBs. And this is Transport, our flagship USB that sold out. And we've toured all around the world distributing files. We realized that like DJs aren't like the only people that need to be using USBs. We want to be a bit more inclusive and touch with people who care about memories and digital creatives. We toured so much that we actually were at FWB Idlewild in 2023. We brought this USB Club ATM machine and distributed files from the artists and the attendees. So if you know, you got that file pack on you. I have it on my USB, and if you want some of the files, just come and find me. But we're not here actually to talk about USB Club. We're here to talk about Schoolscaping New Campuses.
Yeah. So, quick pulse check on the room before we dive in. Who here went to college? Raise your hand.
Wow.
All right.
Okay. Now, who here dropped out? I see you in the back.
Nice. Who here has been a part of a fellowship?
Okay.
Nice.
Now, who here thinks AI will disrupt education? I agree.
Nice. So, there's many ways to learn, but one thing we definitely believe is that there's no wrong way to learn. And so today we're going to be covering our pedagogy, which is a new design methodology for education. And the first topic is
Circles of learning.
nice.
So, circles of learning is an incredible mental model that helps build the foundation and building blocks of how we think about this methodology. A circle of learning really is just a group of people who come together and create their own conventions to teach, unlearn, and learn. We're actually kind of in a circle of learning right now. And in a circle of learning,
Are learners, and learners bring curiosity to a subject or area of knowledge. And they move about the circles of learning with free will. And we call them learners instead of students because students tend to carry a sense of hierarchy, and we're all learners here. So that's one of the folks in the circles of learning, and the other
are educators. Again, we don't say teachers for the same reason of the hierarchy. And educators are ones who actually create educational environments. We've got a lot of this learning from Laurel Schwartz, so shout out to her. And educators often carry with them these processes.
Yes, they often carry them around like a little backpack going between circles of learning. And these processes wind up becoming the curriculum. They're a series of courses or programs to explore subject matter. It's important that the educators are able to move with free will just like the learners with their processes.
And like, let's give it a little example. In a micro level, this is our process. We're giving this talk. This is the process. But on a macro level, FWB with their schedule, that's their process. And that's kind of the curriculum design in itself. And so as you can see, we kind of have this organic sense typology in language. to make sense of how we learn and what we formally know are. Is this clicking? I think my clicker stopped working.
Oh boy.
I am clicking the button.
Nice. Well, we can talk about
Well,
the next.
is there a way to manually click it?
Nice.
Institutions. Cool. So institutions are often the things that we are most familiar with, which are traditional accredited universities or even our high school. And there can be semi-permanent or permanent. Our hot take is that institutions should eventually die and they shouldn't last forever, which is becoming more and more popular. But to be honest with you, Norm and I have often big ideas, and our idea was to architect a campus and design a campus. And we really started to consider the timeline, the resources, and we're like, this seems like a long time scale. And Norm and I met throwing a hackathon together. We barely were in school. We always were in different schools learning, hacking our own curriculum. And so we adopted this mindset and realized, we have actually everything we need already in front of us, kind of with that hacker mindset. And we created this thing called a learner card. And that was a game changer. The learner card is what we did is we connected startup spaces and art studios together in both Manhattan and Brooklyn, and ran an educational fellowship where fellows had access to these spaces. And it was incredibly successful, and it was the first instance of schoolscaping.
And that brings us to our second topic, schoolscaping. So what is schoolscaping? Well, if we know from circles of learning that educational environments are all around us, and we know that a circle of learning could pop up here, could pop up there, well, then how do we see those circles of learning? And to do that, we use a set of tools. And these tools are important because one of the main theses behind Schoolscapes is that it's not about what you want to learn, it's about where you want to learn and what resources you have access to in those environments. And so to define schoolscaping, it is the act of augmenting your educational environments. We did this with the learner card, where we created a lo-fi layer on top of New York City. And so at each of those spaces that were on the learner card, we had these landmarks. They were a block of wood carved into the shape of the logo of Campus Complex, and we gifted them to the spaces. Throughout the program of the Autumn Fellowship, the learners and the stewards of the spaces could use the resources they had to kind of put their unique style from the space onto the landmark. So kind of a organizing tool and kind of a stylistic tool for the spaces. Another one we had was a compass that we made. And this one is a navigational tool that learners could use to find nearby learning spaces. And you can kind of start to see the design language of circles of language, or circles of learning, start to come through in this little tool.
So what's special about the spaces is that they actually provide access to tools, which often acts as a huge barrier of entry. A lot of times when we learn how to use, I'm speaking even in particular, physical tools, it's in the context of a campus behind these guardrails, or they're gated behind private companies even. And that's really been the true unlock that Campus Complex actually provided. An example is sewing. One space we had, Quay, we just brought a bunch of sewing machines together that we were able to collectively get from the space, and ran a workshop for imaginative upcycling. And this is a lot of people's first time experiencing sewing. And it's almost impossible to experience unless you have the money or access to this machine. This can extend even further to things like CNC machines, latest 3D printing things, yada, 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 yada. And I think the cool fun fact and Easter egg here is that USB Club actually has a similar origin story. CDJs, if you don't know, are super expensive. And if you live in Brooklyn, you often consider DJing once, especially if you're in your 20s. And if you want to learn how to DJ with the professional equipment, you either have to have the money to buy it, know someone and haggle them for it, Or you can hit up Pirate Studios, which is all around the world, and book a room and practice as much as you can. And this is where USB Cub actually came from, where, hey, I was like learning how to DJ, and every friend was coming up to me like, yo, I want to learn. How do I start? And I'm like, get a USB, get a USB. And next thing you know, all my friends got USBs on their keychain. And obviously, we expanded it to be more inclusive for other people and made a social network out of these USBs.
Okay, so we have our circles of learning, we have our spaces. We have the Schoolscape that's providing a layer to connect those spaces, and we have learners that are moving with free will. They're traversing the Schoolscape. And this type of movement actually has a name, and it's called careering. So this brings us to our third topic. So what is careering? Well, you may know that career is a noun, which means an occupation undertaken for a significant period of a person's life and with opportunities for progress. What you may not know is that it is also a verb, which means to move swiftly and in an uncontrolled way in a specified direction.
Almost like careening. But you know what's even, I think, more grokable is metaphors. So in the career model, it's typically like a ladder. You stuck in a place, you work your way up, you get that senior role, you get that principal role, you know. Yeah, they keep inventing new titles just to keep going up the ladder. But in careering, it's kind of like you're in the highway switching lanes, swerving, going on your own pace, picking your exit, picking your own route. And a lot of times people say, stay in your own lane and, you know, work up the ladder that way. And if you want to switch industries, you want to switch roles, that's for window watching only. But we don't agree with that. We think you can swerve your way over and do it. And we weren't the only ones. One person who you may be familiar with who did this pretty predominantly was Virgil Abloh. And here's a map of their waypoints of all the ways that their discipline and environments kind of cohesively work together to kind of make sense of how they drew out their career. And so, you know, these are waypoints, and
they are waypoints.
Look a little bit like this.
To our first element of careering. And when you're going through a career, you'll often get asked, maybe you'll get asked to make a career development plan. And they'll be like, okay, what's your 1-year goals? What are your 5-year goals? What are your 10-year goals? And the problem with that is 10 years out, once you get there, your understanding of what you do is probably going to be pretty different. So if you set goals for yourself, it's going to look like you failed those goals. Whereas a waypoint is just a direction to head towards. And so as you're heading towards that direction, you're probably going to find some other waypoints that you can start to head towards. And so you can kind of shift your journey, shift your career journey, go into a different lane. And so setting waypoints, we found, has been much more helpful as a tool than specific career goals.
And so the question one might ask himself is like, how do I know if I'm heading towards like the right waypoints? And the second part of careering that we realized was really impactful is this concept of a moral compass that we practice. And it's really just taking time to sit down and reflect on what your values are. For me personally, it's integrity, acceptance, encouragement, and curiosity. And so if I have that sense in the values and the spaces I'm in and in the work I do, it's kind of a good sign that I'm going to get magnetized to it, and vice versa if it's not the case. That's an exercise that I really encourage people to practice, but that's how you can find your place.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of places, when talking about careering, it's definitely important to talk about the environments. The first environment you start to learn in is the home. Your parents may have an idea of something they think you should do, and you may start heading in that direction. And then you head into a school system, and at some point they'll ask you to pick a major. So you start heading in that direction. And then when you're starting to get ready to enter the workplace, you got to pick a role, and you start heading in that direction. And often it feels like learning or school is just up till your early years, and you leave school and you're done learning. But we definitely believe that the workplace is actually the place you learn the most. You learn the most on the job. And so thinking of the environments that you want to learn in and the environments that you want to spend more time in is pretty crucial in thinking how you want a career.
And the good news is you don't have to do it by yourself. Another thing that we practiced when we were in the Campus Complex Fellowship was this concept of a peer apprenticeship, which is, again, breaking down that hierarchy model where a typical apprenticeship has a mentor-mentee, where here you can find someone who is more of a peer. And it could be something, as we were giving an example earlier, of sewing, where it's like you can meet somebody else who also wants to learn how to sew, has young knowledge in the area, and you can learn alongside with them, and that can be very helpful, encouraging, and also a sense of accountability. And then on the other flip side, there's like, say for example, you're interested in crypto and Bitcoin and it's 2010, 2011, and you're in school and there's no curriculum for it, and you find someone who is interested in it. At that point, you have found another way to find education with someone else on something that has yet to be defined, which is sometimes one of the most exciting things I like to do. And for some context on the VEST, we were with them often just so we can feel a sense of empowerment to be able to move things around and have permission to kind of build a space. And so with that,
we've covered a lot here. So we covered 3 topics. First, circles of learning, which is a group of people coming together to teach, unlearn, and learn in their own conventions.
And then there's obviously Schoolscaping, which the learner card act as a lo-fi AR almost. That's what we call it, where you don't need the AR goggles, but you're able to have the mental shift to see that your educational spaces can also exist outside of institutions.
And then we talked about careering, which is an alternative model for how you can move through your life as you learn and as you work, and how you can find peers to do that with.
So, in an era of AI, which we talked about, and I posed a little question earlier, the place we believe matters more than the knowledge, because that's where you're going to have access to the tools. That's where you're going to have access to the people, to those conversations. We're all likely going to have access to the LLM models and the things on the internet, but when it comes to being able to come together and learn from physical tools, learn from people who are subject matter experts, also in a manner of presence and not just over a Zoom call, it matters a lot. I think one testimony I want to share candidly is one person, we didn't even expect this from the educational fellowship program, got a job from one of the spaces. So shout out to Reggie for hosting Eternal as a space on the campus complex, and they came out to be a great hire. So yeah, shout out to them. And so the point here is that you don't need an institution to have a campus, and I think that's going to be more evident. I feel like I'm on the cusp of saying something like, I'm feeling like how the Teal Fellowship said, get these kids to drop out. And I'm like, no, I'm getting to the point where it's like, hey, we're just going to have to create new campuses. And people are going to have to figure out where they want to learn and realize that where they work is probably the biggest determining factor of where that is. So look to your left. Look to your right. Realize we're all in school together, and we don't need an institution to do that. So thank you so much. This is Campus Complex, and if you want to learn more, you can go to cc.place.
Thanks.
I think we may have some time. I'm not sure exactly how much,
Q&A?
but we would love to do, thank you. We'd love to do some Q&A if anyone has any questions. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a great question. So the question is like, am I curious about the research in the space of schoolscaping? Do I have concerns of if it's actually effective and the funding models around it? I think that there is things like this happening organically and inorganically. An example that popped up after we ran this program is this concept called the network state from Balaji, which this crypto audience may be aware of. We actually went to the network school and checked it out. And they took a much more ethos different approach about it. And I think the effectiveness really comes from, to be frank with you, the people, and kind of like being able to um, evaluate if like they are ones with good values. When it comes to funding, we were lucky to have two patrons. One was Other Internet, and another one was Index Space, and that was in New York. And I think we, as artist founders, this was an art project, and one thing we're entertaining is we just recently moved to SF, and we're entertaining doing a Bay Area edition one. But we're taking our time with it because, yeah, we're taking our time with it because we take seriously being a part of a community, and we just don't want to say we have a cool idea and you should jump on board. I think we care about making those relationships matter. So, yeah, Norm, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I'm curious if that answered your question. I feel like one thing I was maybe picking up is on moving away from institutions, are you thinking that there's more to conduct research on it, more of that funding is in institutions? I'm curious if that was an angle. No, yeah, to that, I think for sure. I mean, I think we're giving the talk because as we chatted a lot with the folks that we ran it with, it kind of seemed like what we've created is a design methodology for education that can be applied in many different ways. So, yeah, would love to see it flourish as a model.
It's a pedagogy, and it could be adopted. Our intent is to let this propagate and just make to more schoolscapes. Like it's not something we're trying to be be extrapolative about or just garner capture. I feel like education is always going to be siding with liberation, unless you care a lot about status, which is where like Ivy Leagues ended up being about. So I can go on and on about that, but I think that's separate from your from your question. Any other questions? Yes. Yeah, great question. So the question is, how do we get funding, and is it free to be a part of it? So I mentioned earlier, Other Internet and Index Space were both patrons of the space. And Other Internet is a research group. Some of us are actually in this room. And Index Space is a space in New York that runs programs and does co-working spaces and cares about education. So that was simply just patronage, which I've heard a lot about in this conference, which is good. And then when it comes to being a part of the program, it was completely free. We actually gave stipends to each fellow for rent, and also for them to have like money on other things. And we also equipped them with, at the time before, we equipped them with the Remarkables, funny enough, because we wanted to encourage them to learn on the outdoors, and there's not a lot of computers that work in the outdoors. Now we have daylight. And so those are like kind of ways that we kind of like just try to equip the fellows with tools and finances to have a peace of mind when they're learning, because if you don't have that peace of mind, it's very hard to absorb.
Yeah, I think the philosophy is also you should be getting paid to learn. Like, if we're learning the most on the job, typically it's like, okay, you have to prove you can do it before you get the job, but it's a perfect training ground to learn how to do the thing. So I think, yeah, giving stipends was being able to get paid to learn.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
It's a great question. I'll let you reiterate the question just in case and answer first because I've been going first.
Yeah. So to reiterate, my understanding is how, kind of the way I think about it is how can organizations help us career? Is that a good summation? And we wrote a little bit about this. You should definitely check out www.careering.life. And the 3 sections are actually how we career, how can individuals career, and how can organizations change. And at some point, we definitely realized, like, okay, a business is just an educational institution. Like, we're all learning how to do this. And there's a couple.
And don't get it twisted. Educational institutions are also businesses.
Yeah. That is correct. And so there's definitely things that organizations can do, such as how they think about career development. I think for us, we've always seen it as success would be if we start seeing, instead of /career pages, we start seeing /careering pages. I think a lot of organizations have a create your own role, which is a step in the right direction. But then once you're actually in the organization, how easy is it to switch lanes inside the organization? We've also thought of an interesting piece of, as we enable learners to move with free will between circles of learning, could you shift the model of how employees move in a business, where there's kind of a phrase you might hear of someone doesn't leave their job, they leave their manager. And so what if the manager just becomes more of a manager agent, and the manager agent has a squad that they're kind of just moving from team to team, from company to company with, and managers already do this. Like, managers will jump to another company and folks will follow over time. So I think leaning into those is some ways that we can start to change the orgs.
Yeah, and I think a more ambitious approach, which is the pragmatism isn't all the way there, but maybe we'll hit it, is I think that roles are going to change, and there's going to be new roles that didn't exist before. And that's not even a new concept. But a company hiring for someone to like define their own roles, like create their own role, if that gets normalized, I think it allows an organization to find more people who are talented and work on a project-by-project basis on the roles versus a company-and-company basis on a role. So if a company hires someone who really believes that someone has potential and they're put on a project and it didn't work out, say worst case scenario, it's like maybe the scenario isn't let's fire them, but instead like, are you down to try a different role? And like obviously have consent on the mutual acceptance of that role and the project that they're on. So that's another framework that we've considered in the theory as well. I think we have time for one more question. Unless we can do 2 in 2 minutes. What's up? That's a great question. Do you have thoughts?
Well, I don't know if I have answers, but I have thoughts.
Hit them.
Okay, so on the organizations being more paternal, my head goes to like how you get healthcare and how that is very much tied to your organization, or for some folks, the visas. And in that sense, I would imagine that parents want their kids to grow up and kind of be on their own. So in that sense, it doesn't really feel that paternal. It feels more like how schools mimic jails. But I don't have answers. Those are just thoughts.
I don't have the answer. I also have thoughts just like Norm. I think the gigification is a byproduct of a macroeconomic change that we're all going through. I think we're going to see a huge shift with AI job displacement, and we're all going to be forced with the idea of like rethinking our roles, which is in line with careering. When it comes to the paternal thing, it's hard to say because not every parent is a good parent, and the paternalistic approach may not even be the best approach because you can care a lot about someone but keep them for the wrong reasons. And so I think it's a framing, and I wish I had the answer, but I think those are just some thoughts to sit with as we see the landscape change underneath our feet. We're at time. This has been great. Feel free to pull us at any time. We're more than passionate to talk about this, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the time here on campus and with your fellow classmates.
Thank you.